Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Typeface helps the world's biggest brands move from business brief to fully personalized campaigns in hours, not months, with its agentic AI marketing platform. They are the first enterprise platform with agentic AI marketing workflows designed to instantly automate work that used to take weeks. With Typeface, one campaign scales into thousands of personalized experiences across ads, email, and video while staying true to your brand. The company's AI native platform integrates seamlessly into your MarTech stack and marketing workflows and includes enterprise-grade security. Adweek named Typeface AI Company of the Year. Time Magazine featured them as a best invention, and Fast Company called them the next big thing in tech. See how major brands like ASICS and Microsoft are transforming marketing with Typeface. Learn more at typeface.ai/CMO. Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to CMO Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Kip Knight. Today's topic, brand you, building your personal brand as a marketing leader. Now, Kip is the founder of CMO Coaches, which provides executive coaching and hands-on leadership for senior marketers. Previously, he was the CMO of Taco Bell and president of H&R Block US Retail. He currently works with several startups and as a coach and as a business advisor. He's coached over 200 CMOs. And full disclosure, Kip and I worked together at P&G a little bit ago. I've been an instructor in CMO boot camp. So I consider him, and he is without a doubt, a CMO Confidential OG. This is his fourth appearance on the show. Welcome back, Kip.
Mike, pleasure to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation today.
All right, let's just jump into it. Let's start with the fundamentals. You know, when you talk about personal branding and a personal brand, why do you think it's so critical today?
Well, Mike, we've both worked on a bunch of brands. And great brands are never accidental. And I think great personal brands are also never accidental. And one thing I hope the listeners get out of today's conversation is to really think seriously about what is your brand out there in the marketplace. And again, using development of brands as a criteria, two critical things you've got to have on any brand you work on is trust and authenticity. And think about people you admire in the business world or CMOs that you admire. Do you trust them, Mike?
I do.
And do you think they're authentic?
I do.
And think of ones that you are not such a big fan of.
Ask me more questions. I'm going to say badgering the witness.
I'm going to ask one I think I know the answer to. So I feel somewhat sorry for Elizabeth Holmes, but would you trust Elizabeth Holmes?
No, I would not.
Do you think she was authentic?
Yes, Elizabeth Holmes is the bad blood protagonist who was the Theranos woman
and currently serving time in a federal penitentiary, I think. So the Elizabeth Holmes syndrome is when you're trying to be something you're not. Mike, if you started dressing like Steve Jobs on every one of these podcasts, I'd be very concerned because you're a very unique brand. I'm a very unique brand. And so I would encourage everybody to think about what is it that's going to make you unique as a CMO? And that could be any number of things. It could be, what types of situations do you thrive in? Do you prefer a startup? Do you prefer a corporate environment? Do you like a turnaround? Do you like a particular category? Do you want to work internationally? These are all things that will help determine your brand and also what you're going to be famous for.
Hey, let's take a minute. There's always been, personal brands have always existed, regardless or not. In the era of social media and AI, where you can find anybody and job search can be done with a bot, in your mind, is personal branding more important now than it was 20 years ago, or is it at the same level?
Oh, absolutely more important because, first of all, there's the opportunity to become better known. I mean, think about it. When we started, I know you don't like to talk about how many years ago, but when we started, Mike, if you wanted to be a well-known head of marketing, there were some opportunities maybe at a AMA conference, or you could get interviewed by Ad Age, but that was it. Think about today. I mean, you've got your own podcast, for God's sake. You can do blogs, you can
I
do
know anything can happen, Kip.
anything can
Anything,
happen,
clearly.
Mike. So in that crowded space, it's both an opportunity and frankly a threat, because if you're a shrinking violet as a CMO and you're hoping to go out and do great things and attract, companies to want to hire you, they've got to know your brand. They've got to have brand awareness. They've got to have brand regard, and they've got to have a willingness to say, hey, Mike Linton seems like exactly the guy we need. Let's go talk to Mike. So yes, you absolutely need to lean in on that.
So this says the power of the brand, which we've had other guests on the show reference, in the age of AI, it's more important than ever because the bots are doing a lot of the searching. And if your brand is not actually consistent and available, there's a chance you won't get found. Am I shorthanding this correctly?
Well, also don't forget, it's a competitive marketplace out there. I mean, it's not like there's only one candidate for a CMO position. Companies will typically, they'll start with maybe 20 candidates, and they'll narrow it down to the top 5 and then the top 2. You've played the game before. So to all of the aspiring CMOs out there, I would say, what is your game plan? I mean, I don't want to use politicians as an example because you know how that will go. But politicians are absolutely aware of social media's power. And if you look at the most recent election results, you can see if you do that well, you have frankly, an unfair advantage over some of the other candidates that are vying for the same position.
Okay, let's go to we taught a seminar a little bit ago to a bunch of marketers where we talked them through the personal brand development framework. Why don't you talk about how our listeners should go about developing their own brand framework?
Well, it's, as you know, there are 3 components to it. There's self-assessment, there's brand positioning, and there's brand activation. So let's break those down individually and do a little back and forth as to what we think of those. So let's start with self-assessment. One of my favorite expressions in coaching is you can't read the label from inside the bottle. I mean, it is impossible for you to know how other people.
And it's really cramped in there.
Yeah, it's really, really cramped. And so if you look around as to, well, how do you read the label on the bottle? Well, there are plenty of resources out there. If you work for any kind of company that has any type of HR system, you're going to have 360s, you're going to have performance reviews, you're going to have team feedback. So you should be getting a lot of information, even without trying, as to how are you currently perceived. One-on-ones with your boss. Hopefully, if you've got a great boss, they're going to be honest enough with you to tell you not only what your strengths are, but also what your opportunities are. And finally, and coaches love this, there's so many different assessment tools out there. There's Working Genius and DISC, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, lots of others. I will put in a plug for Working Genius. I think that is one that does a great job helping identify what are your superpowers, your 1 or 2 superpowers that you should really lean in on and be known for.
We will take a quick break from our show for a message from our sponsor, Typeface. To orchestrate workflows across channels, meet Arc Agents, your AI teammates handling complexity so you can focus on what matters. All within a reimagined workspace where you and AI create as one. Spaces works the way you do. Create anything, from documents to videos to entire campaigns, at scale. Our agents help you craft campaign storyboards, powered by your Brand Hub, giving you the perfect starting point. Transform one asset into countless variations for every audience and market. Join industry leaders already reimagining their content lifecycle with Typeface. Welcome to marketing's next chapter, where every story finds its voice. Now back to our conversation with Kip Knight.
I want to jump in on the self-assessment thing. because one of the things I think people do is they're not objective on their self-assessment. And they will give themselves the benefit of the doubt on every edgy thing. But when they get actually in the game, and we talked about how competitive it is for the really good jobs, that lack of objectivity will likely not help them at all. So how do you talked about these tools, but how do you recommend people really do an honest, deep self-assessment?
Well, I'll give you an acid test on it. I used to always write my annual review in draft form and give it to my boss. I wanted to be the first writer of history to say, this is how I did. And you're doing a pretty good job when your boss says, I think you were too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And Mike, I know you're the same way. If you are an athlete and you're looking to break the 4-minute mile or whatever, you wouldn't be, giving yourself a pat on the back if you went out there and just had an okay workout. You want to push yourself to the limit. You want to find out what you're capable of doing. I think you've got to be the same way in yourself. You've got to know what you're really, really good at. And the same breath, you've got to know what you suck at. You need to know the areas in which you're going to need help on. And you've got to have the willingness to turn to others and say, I am not that good at this. Help me, please.
Well, and let me say something, like give a couple objectivity examples. If you are managing one person, yes, you are managing people, but you're not really managing people. You're managing a partner. Don't fool yourself that you're going to win the game versus somebody who's managing a department of 10 when you have one. And also say you're buying, search words and you have a $10 million budget. They up your budget to 20 million and they promote you a level. It's a promotion, but it's not really a skill set development thing. You're still essentially doing the same job at scale. And I think a lot of people will say, this is a proof point that I am fantastic, when in truth, they haven't proved much different than they had before they did what they did next.
Well, Mike, let me debate you on that one a little bit, because I think different strokes for different folks. When we were at Procter, they had people that had been there literally their entire year. They've been entire career, 40 years in the same role. And to be candid, at first I was a little bit snobbish about that. I thought, wow, what happened to them? But then I came to appreciate some people are just really love a certain niche and they're really, really good at it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I buy that. But if you want to get promoted, and if you want to,
absolutely,
be a
promoted,
CMO,
that is not your ticket to fame.
That is not your ticket to fame. I did this for 10 years and then they doubled it. Instead of 4 people, I managed 8.
Right.
That is not your ticket to fame.
Right.
So I'm in agreement that if your goal is to do this one job fantastically for your whole career, then that is a totally great thing. But don't expect that someone's going to come and raise you for the C-suite out of that job unless it is already at a very, very high level.
Well, and to put a pen on the self-assessment, that's maybe the first question you got to ask yourself. Exactly how ambitious are you?
Yeah.
Because if you're super ambitious, but you don't have a strategy to go along with it, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Well, and I guess the other thing I would say is you have to do the work to develop the true proof point.
Right, exactly.
Because people aren't going to hire you based on your belief. They're going to hire you based on the proof point of what you've done.
Right.
Let's flip this over. So we've talked about the framework and the need to go get this framework and, self-assessment, and then a full understanding of what you are selling to the buyer who is hiring you. Let's talk about how you arrive at work. Executive presence, confidence. A lot of people either think they have imposter syndrome or really do. Talk about, executive presence and how that fits into personal branding.
Okay, but Mike, before we move on to that, I'm going to go a little bit deeper on some of the strategy that I think a person.
Okay, let's go.
So we've got this thing called brand positioning that we work on as marketers, but I think you've also got to think of yourself in terms of brand positioning. And that is taking all of that data you get from your self-assessment and figuring out what is it that you are really, really good at. And let me give you a personal example. I'm going to turn it around and ask you the same thing. I'm really good at generating new ideas. I mean, you give me a problem and I would generate a half a dozen, I think, great ideas right off the top of my head. What I'm lousy at is filtering those ideas.
You are.
Which of those ideas, if anything, are worth doing. So part of my self-assessment is knowing when to lean into what I'm really good at and knowing when to turn to other people, such as yourself, and say, Mike, I've got some thoughts. What do you think? And then we go from there. And Mike, I know that you've got a similar, you've got some superpowers, but you've also got some kryptonite there.
Yes, but people have traditionally hired me for, driving change and building brands, businesses, and teams, and they usually don't hire me on a stable business to squeeze another couple points out of it, or for my super attention to detail. So,
well, and for all the basketball fans out there, I think the most famous example, Michael Jordan, greatest basketball player of all time, but he also played professional baseball. He wasn't that good at it, though. So my point is, after the self-assessment, you've really got to figure out, what do you excel at? What can you do better than anybody else? And how do you invest in yourself to make sure that that's what you're famous for?
okay, so closing off on the framework thing, let's go. Is there any more points on framework you want to add?
No, I think that'll do it for now.
All right, let's go to the whole thing about executive presence and how that fits into your personalized or your personal branding effort.
So improving one's executive presence or improving one's confidence in their ability to lead is the number one request we get, not only from CMOs, but frankly, even more often from their boss. And that's not totally surprising, because frankly, who wants to work for a weak leader? Who wants to follow somebody into battle and they're going, well, I guess we got to do this. Let's go. I mean, you want somebody who is fired up and ready to lead and ready to make some tough calls there. So let me make an assumption. Let me make an assumption that anybody that wants to be a CMO and a marketing leader has got the IQ. Okay, that's like table stakes.
Right.
The thing I'm going to push people on to think about and really work on are two things that I've worked on for a number of years. I'm still working on them. And that's your EQ and what I'll call your CQ. Now, your EQ, everybody knows, is, your emotional intelligence. And I would define that simply as, how good are you at reading the room and working with others and resolving differences of opinion and all that? How empathetic can you be to your team? But the one that I think is even more important today than it's ever been is the CQ one. And that is this hunger, this curiosity, that if something like GenAI comes along, do you say, another fad, I'm going to just let that go? Or do you lean in on that one and go, wow, I've got some work to do here. I've got to really lean in. And Mike, you've done a number of podcasts on this. How do you get started on that? How do you make sure that you don't wake up in a year and you feel like, you're still working with a slide rule and everybody else has got a laptop? So it's that combination of IQ and EQ and CQ together that I think are going to make for the most powerful CMOs as we go forward.
And that curiosity to understand not just what, but how and why that should be relentless in a marketplace where technology and consumers are changing at speed. And I also want to talk about this executive presence thing, where a bunch of people don't actually absorb the total leadership mandate. It's like going to the dentist. You don't want to hear your dentist go, you're my third patient. I'm starting to get good at this. Or the pilot say, this is my first time I've flown the airliner. I'm like, just get in and play and act like a leader. Don't be so timid you actually don't play the game.
I agree with that. But in the same breath, I would tell folks, it is perfectly okay. In fact, it's a smart move to admit when you don't know something. You probably had bosses, I have too, and you knew they were in trouble. You knew they didn't know what
you knew it.
But they didn't have the guts to tell the team, hey, we are in trouble. First we need to define reality, and then we need to figure out how we're going to win this, because right now we are not in a winning position. If you can show some vulnerability, you will be amazed at the loyalty of your team, because they'll realize at that point, you're all in this together. Everybody on the team's important and needed. And how do we go forward and figure this thing out?
Hey, Kip, is that really vulnerability, or is that truth telling? It's like, we've all had bosses where the business is getting slaughtered, and they will say, well, they'll find the 2 or 3 data points that show we're not getting slaughtered and ignore the 75 that show we are getting crushed. And they'll focus on those 3. Talk about the difference between vulnerability and honesty and truth telling.
Okay, well, let's use a live example that unfortunately I think a number of CMOs are already familiar with. Let's say the business is not performing, and let's say that there's been a decision made that you've got to have a 10% reduction in headcount. But because you're the marketing department, it's going to be a 20% reduction in headcount.
Yeah.
Now, as the leader, you could put on the brave face and tell everybody it's going to be fine and not to worry about it. I got your back and all that. You're not serving your team as a leader if you do that. I think when I say showing vulnerability is to go to them and say, we are in a tough situation. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can't make any promises, but the only thing I can assure you of is I'm going to be as transparent as I can be. And I'm going to try to make sure that everybody lands in a decent place. And unfortunately, I've had to do the same thing. I'm sure you have as well. But the leaders that I hate, the worst ones are they send out the email that basically says you're all fired. And then the other end of the spectrum is when your team honestly can feel the emotional pain that you're going through with them when you're trying to make these tough decisions. So that's to me.
And I think one of the things that I would opine here is that the reason this is important is this kind of stuff follows your personal brand around.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
and it will become a defining component of your brand, how you handle the toughest situations. And your team will not remember a lot of specific things. They will remember the crises moments very clearly, and that will follow your brand around. Correct me if you think I'm wrong on that.
Oh no, it goes back to the thing I started out with. It's all about trust and authenticity. If they felt like in the toughest time that you were in, could I trust you as a leader, and were you being authentic as a leader? And if the answer to both those is yes, then I think you're going to make people feel like you had their back. If the answer to either of those is no, then you're going to be one of those people that people talk about. I'm glad I don't work for fill in the blank anymore.
Yeah.
What a loser.
Because that does really follow you around. And speaking of fill in the blank, let's talk about, you're a big believer in role models and thinking about like superpowers and role models and that curiosity to find examples everywhere in the marketplace. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's funny as you go up the pyramid and you get to higher and higher levels, you forget what it's like when you're just starting out. And Mike, you and I can remember like when you're invited to the 11th floor at Procter and Gamble to meet.
That's
like
the top floor with automatic doors and guards and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it was like going to the Vatican if you were Catholic. It's a religious experience. But you tend to forget all of that. And it was funny when I was president of H&R Block, I would pretty much spend the entire tax season going around all these different offices. And when I first started doing it, I asked people, why are you so nervous? And they go, because you're here. And then you would realize, oh, I'm the role model now. And that is something as a leader that you've got to constantly keep in mind because they are studying not only everything you say and write, but everything you do. I mean, the body language, the emotions, are you in a good mood or a bad mood? Are you consistent? Are you authentic, et cetera, et cetera? And so the one way I like to define company culture is it's the stories they talk about when the leaders are not in the room. And if you've got a strong company culture, it's stories about how the leaders stepped up and did what they needed to do and led them through adversity and watched everybody in terms of making sure they were taken care of. The bad culture is it's food fight and every person for himself. It was just not a fun place to work. Unfortunately, you and I have had both those experiences, places where the culture was amazing and a positive, and places where the culture was toxic and made it really difficult to want to attract anybody to come join that team.
Yeah, one of my things is once you hit a certain level, surely VP or higher, you're always on. If your team runs into you at the grocery store or anywhere else, they still are looking at you, even if they're your friend as a leader, and then a friend, but you always have to be on. And I think the leaders I've really respected have always been on. So
yeah, and what you don't want to be, I knew a boss one time that people would call, and this is when people had secretaries and admins, but they would call the admin and say, "How's the weather today?" And that was code for, is he in a good mood or a bad? And if they said it looks like it's stormy outside, it might rain, then maybe you want to reschedule that meeting.
That's right. Yeah. Suddenly I have berry and I can't make the meeting. Yeah. So how do people find role models? It's they find role models in their company and who they work for and everything else. How do they find role models in other places?
Well, I'm always a big fan of bios. I don't know if you do a lot of reading either autobiographies or biographies about various business leaders. I find those to be very instructive. And one thing, whether or not you're reading about a Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Michael Dell or any number of business leaders out there, it was not all up and to the right for them. They've all had serious setbacks. They've all had career setbacks. They've all had unpleasant surprises. And the thing you learn from reading about these biographies is what values did they hold to and what got them through the tough times. Because, and Mike, you've been through these as well.
Our careers are surely not up and to the right.
No,
if you look at our, there's a lot of down and to the right steps as you look at them really closely.
And it might have been Benjamin Franklin, but I think the expression of, crises does not build character, it reveals it. So it's like in training. I mean, the more you can kind of think through in advance, okay, if this happens, this is how I think I would respond as a leader, as opposed to hitting the panic button. And you can't fool your team. I mean, if they see you're in full panic mode, there's not a whole lot you can do after that. So keep in mind, you're always 100% under inspection by your team, and they're going to mirror whatever emotions and whatever leadership or lack thereof that you're demonstrating at the time.
Anything more on role models, or should I move to the next question?
Well, one last thing. I've been fortunate enough to have some great role models. I've also had some bosses that were so bad they were very instructive, because I go, I will never do what that person's doing.
Exactly. I had a little book, I'll never do this. So
yeah, and those are important too. You got to keep that in mind.
I hope you're not in anybody's little book.
Yeah, I hope I'm never one of those. I hope I'm never one of those bosses. But the ones I admire, people like Bill Cobb and Peter Hurl, and you and I both work for Bill. And the thing I love about Bill is he taught you the power of consistent principles. I mean, two of the ones I'm sure you've heard many times, and I did too, was disagree and commit and stay in your lane. And you learn that if you could have 3 or 4 like core principles that you would remind your team of sometimes on a daily basis, it really helps cement the team in terms of mission and consistency and the determination to make it through whatever you were facing at the time.
Yeah, I was lucky. I had a lot of good ones early, like John Seeley at Procter and Ed Stevens at Progressive and Wade Fenn at Best Buy, that really kind of, they broadened you while they let you grow, but they were relentless in pushing you.
And if I gave you a couple of minutes, you could probably think of a key principle or a saying that each one of those folks had. I had a boss, Colin Moore. He was also a phenomenal boss, and we called him Colonisms. and I don't know if there are any Kipisms or Mikeisms out there, but you want to be known by your team for having certain core principles that are never going to be violated. That's the way you're going to manage this team and lead this team.
I'm sure maybe some of our listeners will put them in comments, but I had a couple, and one of them was show me the math.
You're right. I remember that one, Mike.
I want to flip over to your belief that marketers are business integrators.
I think marketers should be naturally gifted at being business integrators, because the role of marketing is to listen and respond to the voice of the customer. I think you could take that same skill set and go within various departments of a company and figure out, okay, what is it that we need to do here? And I think GenAI, a topic that we're all thinking about and working on right now, is a perfect example of that. You've had a number of podcasts where it's almost like, be careful here, because if you go ahead and make a quick decision to go after something and it turns out it was not the right bet, there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. So I think this is a unique and perfect opportunity for the marketing leader to bring together the various folks that are going to be involved in this, your IT, your legal, your finance, your HR, probably your CEO, to walk through the math. Like, I know you like that part. Also walk through the options, walk through how aggressive we want to be, walk through what's the criteria for success, and make sure everybody at least understands. They don't necessarily have to love, but at least understands and is willing to support whatever that game plan is. Because again, these are the times in which if you make the right bet, then, Katie bar the door, you're going to be fantastic. If you make the wrong bet, or if you just rush into something and you don't think it through, it could be disastrous. I mean,
well, my thing was make sure if you're doing a big initiative in particular, that the company has a chance to join it versus just execute it.
Yes.
And
yes.
I want to flip over to networking before we get to our traditional last question, because I
Okay.
know you have some thoughts. We've talked about personal branding and a bunch of stuff. Let's add the professional network in there. Give our listeners some advice on how to think about networking.
Well, probably the oldest cliche in business is it's not what you know, it's who you know. But as you know, Mike, it's true. And I've currently got over
It's not
70.
always true, but it's true enough that you shouldn't shut the door on it.
Well, I think you need to know something, but if you don't know the right people, I'm not sure what you're going to do with it. So I've got over 17,000 connections on LinkedIn. I work on my networking every day, but I do have some practical tips I want to pass along for folks to think about. There are three of them. And I learned this the hard way. I'm constantly having people referred to me, and I used to, just warm up the act, get to know them, and all that other good stuff. And then 30 minutes in, you'd find out what they wanted. Forget that. You start the conversation. How can I help you today? Maybe that's a little New Yorker coming out, but how can I
not
help
even
you?
close to a New Yorker.
Oh, I know. But it is a very effective time saver, and they appreciate it because, frankly, if you can't help them, why are they going to want to waste the next 29 minutes talking to you? They're going to want to move on to the next person. So that's tip number one. How can I help you? Number two, warm introductions. Mike, if you ask me, can I introduce you to so-and-so? I would never even think about doing that unless I checked in with that person first.
Exactly.
These cold introductions to me are just incredibly rude. Now, the one thing I will say on that is if you agree to introduce somebody and that person doesn't respond, then that's on them. That ghosting to me is one of the most irritating things that is happening these days. And it's especially important if you want to maintain that reputation as being trustworthy and authentic, because those people that are authentic and trustworthy answer their emails if they get a warm introduction. So
or else they are transactional networker, which means over time they will have a much weaker network.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, as you age, as you get to more and more senior positions, obviously you're going to have to be selective in terms of how much of this you're going to want to do for others. But you have to accept the fact that you're going to be much more of a giver and less of a taker. And that is a privilege that we've got to be able to help the younger folks out. So for all these, senior folks that are like, well, why would I bother to do that? Say, hey, man, somebody helped you when you were in that position, and you probably wouldn't be where you were if they didn't. So it's time to, return the favor and help these folks out that are looking for a leg up. So don't resent it. It's a privilege. It's an honor. You should do it.
It's also fun. It's also, it keeps you in the game as well. So this brings us, Kip, to our traditional last question, which you are very familiar with. Funniest story you can share on the air and/or practical advice we haven't discussed yet. Take it away. You must take at least one, but you can take both.
Well, Mike, for the fourth time in a row, I'm going to avoid the practical joke or the story because you just never know how that's going to land. But I will give you a really good practical tip. And it ties back into the networking, and it also ties back into your personal branding. And that is never underestimate the power of a handwritten note on high quality stationery. And I learned this from a boss I had who was terrific at writing out handwritten notes to people anytime that he wanted to recognize something or thank them for something. When I was head of H&R Block, I started the tax season off by writing a handwritten thank you to each one of my 30 divisional leaders. It's so rare these days to get that. It makes it even that much more special. And let me just cut off anybody that goes, oh yeah, I do that. I do an email. An email is nowhere close.
It's not the same
in terms of emotional impact you're going to have. So for God's sake, people, invest $100 on the highest quality stationery you can afford. Those little postcards, write it out in ink, emboss it at the top with your name. You will be amazed at the impact that will have.
Look, I did something like that at one of my jobs. I was encouraged by my HR business partner, and I was shocked by how many people posted them on their desk.
Absolutely, and because they're so rare, and it
Yeah.
means you care. It means you are thinking about them and caring about them. And as a leader, that's what you want your team to feel, that you've got their back.
All right. Well, our producer will send you a thank you note written on high gloss stationery.
All right, Jeff, I'm looking at you.
So it's a great way to end the show. Thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. If you're enjoying the show, hit like, share, and subscribe. New shows drop every Tuesday, and all of our nearly 150 episodes are available on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Previous episodes include Marketing, the battle between believers and non-believers, parts 1 and 2. The rise and fall of Peloton is seen through the lens of CLTV. Colonel Mustard in the study with the job spec, how poor design shortens CMO lifespans, and Kip's earlier shows, including why marketers should learn finance and why the short shelf life of CMOs. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential. Legacy marketing tools weren't built for AI. Typeface is the first multimodal platform where agentic workflows handle everything from brainstorming to launch across every channel and customer touchpoint. Their AI native design transforms manual marketing tasks into automated workflows that create personalized text, imagery, and video at enterprise scale. Typeface's AI integrates with existing MarTech stacks through APIs and native connections. So you keep your processes while gaining AI superpowers and enterprise-grade security. See how brands like ASICS and Microsoft accelerate innovation and transform a single idea into thousands of personalized on-brand experiences instantly. Ready to see what marketing looks like when AI handles the heavy lifting? Learn more at typeface.ai/CMO.